air missions were flown. Countless bombs were dropped. Unquantifiable costs, financial and in human lives, were incurred. And we may just be at the beginning. Joining me now from New York is the best investigative journalist in the United States of America, and commentator too, Russ Baker. Russ, welcome once more to The Real Deal.
Thanks, George. Great to be here.
Now, Russ, your forces stayed out of all this wisely, although most of the weaponry carries, of course, the ubiquitous stars and stripes. The Libyan regime carried out an extraordinary clandestine lobbying operation, it turns out, in the US, trying to persuade the Democratic Party and the president to oppose the NATO action. Now, how has it all gone down? How has it been playing out in the American media?
Well, speaking for myself, I, like you, had my problems with Qaddafi, and when I first heard about an uprising, I was excited about it, and I understood the notion of a humanitarian intervention in case there was a slaughter. But as time passed, I began thinking about this and digging in, and on our website, WhoWhatWhy.com, now for several months, we've been publishing pieces, scrutinizing very carefully what's going on there. Here are some thoughts. Basically, the initial claim that NATO was going in there to protect Libyans seems to be untrue. That has never, or I should say very rarely, been an actual reason for Western military intervention, and I don't think it was the case there. I began trying to figure out what was the case, and it occurred to me at some point that the Arab Spring was essentially a threat to NATO. And the beautiful thing about Libya is that what's going on there is essentially NATO's own Arab Spring. They are in the driver's seat in a country right next to Egypt, which has just had all of that tumult. It's a country that has tremendous amounts of oil, and particularly a grade of oil, which is highly prized, a sweet crude. And then, of course, you have many, many other agendas of Britain, Italy, and France in terms of Libya being a key actor with immigration patterns, the finances in Africa, and much, much more. So I think there's a great deal more going on there that we're not hearing about in the corporate media.
Absolutely true. Now, the American politicians probably kept their heads down. Has the media in the United States been as gung-ho as the media over here in Britain?
It's been absolutely disgraceful, George. As bad as it was with Iraq or any of these other things, it's almost as if we can never learn a lesson. And I think this is really what is fundamentally unreformable about the media in this country. It's why I started WhoWhatWhy.com, which, as you know, is a nonprofit. We don't take corporate money. We don't take advertising. Our contention is that basically it becomes impossible for the media to actually investigate these things. They've got to just take things at face value. But all you've got to do is look at the stories that came out. Very early on, they started putting out these stories that cast Qaddafi in a terrible light. For example, claiming that he was encouraging his troops to commit mass rape, supplying them with Viagra, and even more ridiculously, with condoms. And as you know, on WhoWhatWhy.com, we started looking at that early on. We said it didn't make any sense. There was no evidence of that. But it was very, very powerful. And newspapers and electronic media in the United States and Britain and throughout the world just lapped that story right up. They then started coming out with new stuff claiming that Qaddafi had personally ordered the Lockerbie bombing. The man who said that he had the evidence, a former minister of Qaddafi's, said he would be producing it imminently. He never did. The press never followed up on any of that.
There was also a race issue. I don't know how well known in the United States this is, but there's ample evidence of the lynching, literally the lynching of black Libyans, and indeed some black migrant workers in Libya, by these so-called rebels, on the principle that if they're black, well, they might well be mercenaries that Gaddafi has hired from one African country or another.
Well, that's right. And of course, that's a remarkable irony since Obama is getting essentially favorable press on this, first African-American president. That issue should be front and center because these are Libyan citizens, and it is a case of extreme racism and terror against their own people. That story should be covered.
Now, another flicker was only a flicker in the Pentagon's purview was that there was a flicker of Al-Qaeda about the Libyan rebels. It could well be that we've given all these guns and given all these billions now and become the Air Force for the same sort of chaps that we helped into power in Afghanistan.
Well, that's right. And in fact, what's very interesting are the indications of both NATO knowing that these elements are significant in the rebel forces, that Gaddafi actually was very much a friend of the West, particularly in recent years, in holding the line against that kind of fundamentalism. And also very interesting, for example, General Hifter, who was brought in to try to solidify these forces, as we reported on WhoWhatWhy.com, that he had previously spent 20 years living in the United States just down the road from CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, with no visible means of income throughout those years. So they'd been in there very, very early, just as they were in on the ground in creating Al-Qaeda back in the 80s.
Now, I'm a regular reader, thanks to you sending me the links of your website. I must say, and I described you at the beginning, and I'm not exaggerating, you are the best investigative journalist now working in America, although that's not quite the compliment it once would have been, because there are not that many, but you're by far the best. Tell us how people can follow you on that website.
Well, it's WhoWhatWhy.com. We're also on Twitter, WhoWhatWhy, and we are working very, very hard to build our team. As you'll see, my byline is on a lot of stories. We're working hard to expand our team, get more people working on stories. We want to be, we want Britain and we want the world very much to be part of our audience. We'd love to hear story ideas from you. You can contact us via the site. If you like what we're doing, you can go to WhoWhatWhy.com and click on the donate button at the top right and become part of making our work possible.
Now, I'll tell you what, I can't have a man like you on the show without asking you this. Many people in Britain are absolutely fixated on the battle going on amongst the 7 dwarves or 8 dwarves on the Republican right for the right to stand against Obama at the next presidential election. Some people thought that it was something to fear if Sarah Palin were to get the gig. It turns out that she wasn't the worst possible option, and that this woman Bachmann, who is even more bonkers than her, might well end up with the nomination. Can you set our mind at rest, or is she on the way to victory?
You know, George, every few days they change the scenario, they shake it up. It's basically a grand entertainment, a grand spectacle, which all amounts to absolutely nothing. They are now saying that Bachmann's on her way down, Romney's on his way down, and the new one is this Rick Perry, who is a follow-up on George Bush as another governor of Texas.
Another governor of Texas, my God.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, the thing, George, and I focus on this at WhoWhatWhy.com and definitely in my book, Family of Secrets, which you and I have discussed, a history of the Bush presidency, the real story of how power works in the United States, in Britain, and everywhere is that a lot of decisions are determined behind closed doors. They have nothing to do with elections. What they do is they give us these spectacles and all of these crazy people. It's all terribly entertaining. All of our energies are focused on that. And as soon as the election is over, we stop paying attention, which is exactly when we should be looking. I really see these things as deliberate distractions of almost no consequence.
Okay, Russ, we'll talk again, I'm sure. Thanks for that. I'll be coming back to Libya and other matters.